Fear and hatred are taught and learned. A good experiment occurred back in the 20th century. And what they decided to do was this doctor wanted to find out, can you teach infants to fear? And he took a 9-month-old child known as Little Albert, and he put Little Albert on a little mat there and then had a rat come over, had a monkey come by. And Little Albert was, completely mesmerized by the movement of these little furry animals. And he would put a monkey over there, and then he had a rat go over and play, and a dog and a whole bunch of other things. And the little Albert had a inquisitive, curious response to each one of these furry little animals, would reach out and touch it, grab the fur, and respond in a joyful way. They then gave little Albert a break, and then they brought the same animals back out again. This time, every time the animal appeared in front of the infant, they took 2 pieces of metal and banged them together as loud as they possibly could to shock the child. And then they would bring another animal in and bang the 2 things together to shock the child. Eventually, the 9-month-old associated the presence of the animal with the loud, startling sound. And then when they would put the animals in front of the child, it crawled away in fear because the sound frightened, the animal didn't, but they associated the 2 together. It's known as the Little Albert experiment. Later on, it was critiqued, saying, well, later reviews say that the child wasn't permanently affected and did not later on have fear of rats and dogs and things like that. But originally, the experiment was hailed as a success in showing that you can create a stimuli to create a fear response that can then be translated into the presence of something that would be causing fear. A guy by the name of Daryl Davis, a black man who was 10 years old at the time, joined the Cub Scouts in Massachusetts. And this was back in 1960-something. And he was the only black to be marching with the whites there in Massachusetts. And as they were heading down the street, somebody threw a rock at him. And then someone threw a bottle at him. Quickly, the Cub master, the guy in charge, the adult, formed a protective circle around Daryl Davis, and they quickly got off of the parade route. Davis went home to his father. Davis is 10 years old at the time, and said, why do they hate me? They don't even know me. And the father explained racism to this young man there in Massachusetts. But the question stayed with him until 1983. He always wanted to know, why would somebody hate me? They don't even know me. Joe Davis was a really good, and still is, musician. And he was playing at a bar in Maryland. And it was 1983. There were some white folks in the bar. Some of them were actually members of the KKK. And one of them came up to Daryl Davis and says, hey, you play pretty good. You play, you play like Jerry Lee Lewis.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brain. Too much love drives a man insane. You broke my will, oh, what a thrill. Goodness, your records just quitting balls of fire.
Davis explained to the man that, well, actually, Jerry Lee Lewis got a lot of that style and a lot of the chord progressions and the rhythm from black musicians. The man in the small bar where Daryl Davis had just played was somewhat curious, but at the same time apprehensive to believe, but he went along with it. Daryl and the man shared a beer, and then the man admitted that, I'm a member of the KKK here in Maryland. This was Daryl Davis's chance to ask someone, why do you hate me? You don't even know me. The question that had haunted him since the time he was 10 years old, marching there in Massachusetts. The man said, well, I could put you in touch with somebody. You might want to talk to Roger Davis. He heads the KKK here in Maryland. And he handed Daryl Davis a business card. Davis took it, put it in his wallet, and took only about 2 days to decide, I'm going to call Roger Davis, the head of the KKK, and meet him. He had his assistant, a female, call Roger Davis for fear that Davis might hang up on him right away if he detected there was a dialect that could be considered to be black. So he had his assistant, his secretary, call, and Roger Davis, Roger, Kelly, and Daryl Davis decided to meet. And they would meet at a Park Motel, the Park Motel. Not exactly the nicest of hotels, probably something somebody would rent for the hour or so. And there was Roger Kelly and Daryl Davis in this small hotel room. It was dark. Kelly had come with a bodyguard that had a gun on his side. Daryl sat in a chair across from Roger Kelly, who was the head of the KKK. They were exchanging pleasantries. Daryl explained to Kelly that he was writing a book and wanted to talk to him. The interview was slow at first. Both were sort of trying to feel each other out. Whenever there was any silence between the questions and the answers, Daryl Davis says you could feel the tension. And then suddenly, a cooler placed off to the side that Daryl Davis had instructed his assistant to get and put Coca-Colas in there and some ice in there. There was suddenly a sound. Bang. Within an instant, both men, one black, one white, their eyes met, and fear was in their eyes. Neither one of them knew where the sound came from. Both terrified that their life might end with the next sound. But they were locked into each other's eyes. They didn't know where the sound came from, and fear took them over. Well, it turns out the sound was nothing more than the ice had melted, and the Cokes that were on top in the ice chest had fallen down to the bottom. Daryl Davis learned a very important lesson right at that point.
Hate stems, I believe, from fear of the unknown, and I think this is all across the board, regardless of whether it's a Klansman or anything else.
But he has no illusions about the Klan. If he did, his friend would be quick to disabuse them.
And I believe in separation of the races. I believe that's in the best interest of all races.
Does he really? Or has friendship transcended the color barrier? Listen to Kelly at a Klan rally.
I'm a far-right man to hell and back, because I believe in what he stands for and he believes in what I stand for. A lot of times we don't agree with everything, but at least he respects me to sit down and listen to me. And I'll respect him to sit down and listen to him.
Kelly and Davis would go on to become friends, and Kelly would invite Davis to be the godfather of his child. Because in that room, in that Park Hotel, when both men feared each other, they didn't know what had caused the fear. They didn't understand where the sound had come from, but they knew both were completely vulnerable to what would happen next. And then once they learned, it was nothing more than the ice melting and the Cokes dropping to the bottom of the ice container, the fear went away. Because, as Daryl Davis learned as well, that fear breeds hate, and hate breeds destruction.
This was a teaching moment. The lesson taught is ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. If you do not keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will breed hatred. If you do not keep that hatred in check, that hatred in turn will breed destruction. We want to destroy those things that we hate.
Got it? Daryl Davis went on to actually help to talk 40 to 60 men out of the KKK, and each one would leave. They would give him his robes. They say, Daryl Davis and others, that he's responsible for getting up to 200 men to leave the Ku Klux Klan there in Maryland. they reformed again in 2017. A shot was fired out in hatred against another man, and a KKK member was taken and put into jail, and it was Daryl Davis that paid his bail to get him out. Davis finally understood why somebody hated him. They didn't even know him because they feared him. So today, as we saw fear and hatred displayed there in Utah, when a shot rang out and killed Charlie Kirk, someone taught that kid, who's 23 years old, to hate him, to fear him. Where did the fear come from? Who told that young man that had that rifle on that building that he should fear Charlie Kirk, that he should fear the words of one man? Somewhere it's coming from. Just like the slamming of two metal bars together to cause a little kid, a little baby, 9-month-old, to fear a small dog that just seconds ago he was having no trouble with. There is something in our society that is banging those two pieces of metal together that take away our ability to know one another, not fear one another, not hate one another, not want to kill one another.